Good morning and welcome to Coffee Talk. We are your hosts, Southborough Youth and Family Services. I am Sarah Castle. I am the Director of Southborough Youth and Family. And with me this morning, I have Megan Island, who's our Assistant Director. Good morning, Megan.
Morning.
We have Shannon Knyman, who's our Program Coordinator. Good morning, Shannon.
Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning. And we're so excited to welcome Katelyn Gawthrope from Wayside, I have to say it right, Wayside Youth and Family Support Network. Katelyn is a clinical director at the Metro West Community Services Center at Wayside. Katelyn, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you. Let's start with a coffee toast.
Oh, yes.
I was telling the ladies this morning, it's like 95 degrees in my office today, so drinking hot coffee is really hard right now. But I feel as though I need to do it for camaraderie's sake.
Yes.
And to caffeinate myself.
Mm.
Is anybody else struggling with this time change?
Oh, for
I have.
sure. Yes.
Yeah,
I think
I'm
it's
feeling-
hardest on kids waking up yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It takes a little while to adjust, but I have also been feeling that. I've been trying to get up and exercise in the morning before my children wake up, which means that I'm setting an alarm for 5 a.m., which right now is really 4 a.m. And I didn't succeed this morning. I reset my alarm after that. So.
Oh, well, it's good to be gentle to yourself.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just take umbrage with the idea that forever we've been like, what day is it? What day is it? And then every time we change the clocks, it's like, what time is it? So it's just, I give up.
Yeah.
I don't know what year it
Time
is.
has no meaning anymore.
Not
So
at all.
I think I actually didn't even know that it was time for the time change until I don't actually, I would have been clueless if my phone didn't change the time for me. I wouldn't have even known it was happening. So thank you, iPhone, for taking care of that for me. So yeah.
Great. That's great. Well, welcome everybody this morning. We are following up on a topic we started last week. If you haven't had a chance to watch that, we highly suggest it. We are covering services available for families experiencing mental health emergencies and significant emotional distress within their family and what options families have in those situations. So last week we were talking with Jennifer Drowan, who is a Southborough resident who has had some firsthand experience with needing psychiatric emergency services for her son, and also with Kara Casey, also from Wayside Youth and Family Support Network, as well as Advocates, who's a mobile crisis clinician, to talk with her about what options families have in the case of a mental health emergency. So we may talk about mobile crisis a little bit today, but we wanted to follow up on that topic by letting families know about some other options that they might have for an emerging mental health concern that's significant in nature. So Katelyn is with us this morning. Katelyn's been very involved with something called Children's Behavioral Health Initiative, which was rolled out by the state of Massachusetts. And we, just to shorten that, we're gonna throw an acronym your way, which is CBHI. So Children's Behavioral Health Initiative is CBHI. And these services may be available to your family. So I guess I'll start there, Katelyn. I say maybe available to families because CBHI has an interesting history, which you've been a part of. And I think it's interesting information to share with families. At its inception, these services were available only to Mass Health subscribing families. So maybe you could just start there by telling us a little bit about why that is, and about the development of this initiative.
Sure thing. So at the turn of this last century, now 21 years ago, there was a lawsuit going on, and it was called Rosie D versus the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The plaintiffs were represented by the Center for Public Representation, which is a law firm that's out of Northampton, and they were also involved in the lawsuits that resulted in lawyers being placed at and advocates being placed at Belchertown State Hospital, which is like a way throwback. So anyway, this lawsuit was about kids not having access to services that would keep them out of the hospital. So there are many emotional disturbances that cause kids to need significant support, but do they need to be out of their schools, communities, and homes in order to achieve stability and the ability to manage their symptoms? And the assertion from the plaintiffs was no. In fact, we need more community-based services so that kids don't need to be in the hospital. Being separated from your parents and caregivers, your teachers, your friends is difficult, and it doesn't help you recover. So these services rose out of that, and they've been around probably for about 12 years now. So it's actually really exciting because at the beginning it was they weren't they weren't as prevalent. So there's more now.
That's great.
So what services are made available to families through Cvhi, Katelyn?
So the standard outpatient service is a Cvhi service. They can do some extra care coordination as a result of Cvhi that they couldn't do before, so they can make referrals. But outpatients, you're what most people imagine, right? You go in an office, there's a chair, there's a qualified professional, and you talk. And then these other services are not so traditional or what you would imagine. So there's in-home therapy, which isn't just the therapist coming to your house. It's an intensive intervention that's designed to support families in learning about the emotional disturbance the child is suffering from, and learning about how to talk with their friends, with their family, with schools, within the home to support the child being in the home. Then there's intensive care coordination, which is probably not something that many people have heard of, but it's a really cool service in which you and a clinical provider called an ICC, intensive care coordinator, they sit with you and they kind of figure out like what are the services you need, what are the services you have. They help you create a vision, like where do you want this to go? And a vision can simply be like, we'd like to eat dinner every day without a hubbub. And so then the ICC sort of helps you find the players, talk to the players, coordinate the players so that your child or youth can be successful in the community, at school, etc. There's also in-home behavioral services, which is another really kind of cool service. If you are familiar at all with applied behavioral analysis, I know like a lot of people might not be. So the behavior therapist comes in, does an assessment with you, with the youth, looking for the behaviors you want to change. So some behaviors may be, really undesirable, like, I don't know, throwing food or something. And some behaviors may be ones you want to increase, like getting up on time to go to school. So the behavior therapist helps you come up with a plan that you can then enact, and a behavior monitor will come and help you enact this plan. And the service goes on like that until you achieve some success.
Can I
Oh,
just
sure.
ask a quick clarifying question? Because you mentioned in-home therapy and then in-home behavioral therapy. Could you make, I feel like I have an understanding, but just in case anyone's confused, could you make a distinction between those two?
Yes, yes, yes. So in-home therapy is much more eclectic. The therapist who comes in might have what we call a therapeutic training and support person. So it might be a team of people. And that therapist will look at the situation and perhaps use things that you are more familiar with in the world, like behavior plans that are like charts with checks. An in-home therapist might do some talk therapy with you, with your child. They might, break up into teams, like into groups. Like the therapeutic training support person might go with the child somewhere and talk about a difficulty, and then when I mean go somewhere, I mean like maybe they're walking outside the home, like they're although we could go to a park. That's like the nice thing about in-home therapy. You can, it's very flexible, and you can figure out how you want to tackle the problem. In-home behavioral is a little more specific. They are using what I mentioned before, which is applied behavior analysis. It's a particular theory that talks about, praising kids and youth for some things, and the word in behaviorism is punishment, but all that means is, making a situation undesirable so that the youth or child doesn't want to do that behavior. It encourages them to do something else. So that would be much more specific, and it would be targeting one behavior. Sometimes in-home therapists make referrals for in-home behavioral after they meet with you and see like, oh, there's a particular behavioral concern.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. I
No
cut
problem.
you off. You were about to say
Oh,
something.
no. Well, then I was going to talk about family partners, family support and training. There's a lot of words for these folks. Family partner, family support and training, parent partner, parent mentor. They all essentially mean something very similar, and it's my favorite thing. They have lived experience. These are parents who have navigated the mental health system in one way or another. They have had some success. Perhaps they are still navigating the system, or maybe they're done navigating the system because their children have aged out. You can find them in many places, and I would encourage you to ask if you ever present at the emergency room, or you need to call for emergency psychiatric services. Do you have a family partner around? Because these are people who essentially know what you're going through. And not that clinicians don't know what you're going through, but it's a very different thing to have a child with a mental health concern and to treat a child with a mental health concern. And then the only other service that that you've talked about last week is mobile crisis intervention. That also arose out of CBHI.
That's great. So we have, let's see if I can remember them all. So we have CBHI, which is the overarching initiative, and out of that came in-home therapy, in-home behavioral therapy, behavioral health therapy. I'm not sure if I.
In-home behavioral services.
Thank you.
It's okay.
Thank you. Intensive care coordination. Family partners.
Yes.
How about I've heard of.
Oh, TM.
I was going to say therapeutic
I shouldn't
mentoring.
say TM. Yes, therapeutic mentoring. Therapeutic mentoring is a great service. You have to be enrolled in one of the other services to get it. So I think that's what makes it unique. You need outpatient or in-home therapy or intensive care coordination. I'm not sure if in-home behavioral can support TM. I don't think it does, but so those services refer to this thing called a therapeutic mentor, and it's much more than mentoring like you think of when, you at a local church or at a local school. The reason that it has to be supported by another service is because the in-home therapist, outpatient therapist, or intensive care coordinator does the assessment, and with the family and the TM come up with a learning plan for the youth. So, for example, if a youth is struggling, which that is going to happen, people are going to struggle to reconnect to the community. And, how do I talk to someone at a local coffee shop when I haven't been into a coffee shop and I'm a person with social anxiety? This therapeutic mentor, with the support of the other service, might take this youth to the coffee shop every week for a month and practice this. So it's supported by the other services.
And can I ask another clarifying question? Because I'm imagining someone that's not in this world listening to this. So this isn't going to be like a restaurant that if I'm hearing all of these different things that are being offered, that I'm not going to be like, sounds like therapeutic mentorship would work the best for my child. Like that's not a thing that someone needs to try to figure out on their own.
No. No, you would talk with any one of these therapists. Let's say you started with outpatient, and you went to the office, your child does the intake, you're talking to the therapist, and you're saying, we need more than just once a week with you. That person should have some understanding of these other services and be able to say, okay, well, then we need to make a referral for this, or we need to make a referral for that. Similarly, you can talk to your PCP and say, these are some of the things I'm looking for. There's a lot of alphabet soup out there. There's a lot of different people who can pay for it, for the service. Cvhi is mostly insurance funded, but there's also other services around. So what I would encourage a person to do is say what they need and keep saying it until you find the person who can get you there.
Thank you.
Katelyn, speaking of that, getting involved in these kinds of services, what makes a child eligible for these services? And kind of a follow-up, if they don't have Mass Health, is there another way that someone could get access to these services?
Yes. So, which question should I answer first? How are you eligible? It's actually pretty easy to be eligible. There's a phrase that we use in one of the assessments we do, the Child and Adolescent Needs and Strengths Assessment. A lot of acronyms. And what you are assessing for is their SED criteria. SED stands for serious emotional disturbance. I feel like that language can be a little jarring. Like, does my child with ADHD really have a serious emotional disturbance? But when you look at the threshold, like what that means, it means that they are not functioning in one domain of their life, either family, school, or community. It means that they have some kind of symptom that is excessive for the situation. So the definition of serious emotional disturbance is very broad. If you are experiencing stress as a result of the pandemic, you would probably meet the criteria. Stress in and of itself can cause you to not function. So, don't hear the word serious emotional disturbance and think that doesn't apply, because the threshold's very low. And we want to help kids as soon as they have these symptoms. We don't want to wait. We want to help right here. Kids are incredibly resilient, and they can make change quickly. If you don't have Mass Health, you can access these services. It might be a little bit more complicated, but from my understanding, what I have been told, Cvhi has another component called the Behavioral Health Services for Children and Adolescents. And this starts with your insurance company. So you would call the mental health number on the back of your insurance card and say, I need in-home therapy. Who are the providers in my area that provide in-home therapy for Blue Cross, Aetna, Tufts, etc.
Mhm, mhm.
And there should be a list. They should be able to give you a list. However, if that doesn't work, there's other places you can call. You can call the Behavioral Health Partners of Metro West and say what you're looking for. You could present at a family resource center, which are little centers across the state that are walk in, drop in, and say, I need in-home therapy. I need intensive care coordination. And they should be able to help you because these are people who know how to navigate the system. I agree that it's complicated. And when your child's suffering, it's not an easy thing to follow all these little directions.
Mhm, mhm. I wrote those things down because I think what we can do is in the comments following the show, we can be sure to provide Behavioral Health Partners of Metro West their phone number, as well as the family resource centers. You were mentioning that to us before the show, and I don't know that that was something that was on our radar. So it's a good resource for us to be aware of.
Yes, there should be one for each region. So the one for Metro West is in Framingham, and there are others throughout the state, Lowell, Fitchburg, depending on your region. But all you have to look, Family Resource Center, Massachusetts, in an internet search, and you will likely find it.
Great. Thank you.
Great. So all of the talk that we had this morning, these services are for youth, for children. So what about, I know that this isn't your wheelhouse necessarily, Katelyn, but if we have somebody watching that says, but maybe it's me that needs the services, or my partner. So are adults, are these similar programs available for adults?
So there are some community supports for adults. There's a program called Community Support Program that is paid for through Mass Health or Medicaid for people who are having difficulty staying out of an inpatient hospitalization. And it's a sort of like a youth and family support worker kind of person who helps you kind of executive function, get through different things that you need to get through in order to make your life a little bit more manageable. There are, an adult could also apply for DMH, the Department of Mental Health. Sorry, more alphabets. A person could also go to several of the clubhouses around the state, which are drop-ins for adults with mental health concerns. I should also mention that you should check with your employer to see if they have an employee assistance program. Those are often good sources of getting connected to therapists. You can also tell your PCP, tell your insurance company. A lot of insurance companies have nurse lines. I think one of the things that I see that happens with mental health is people forget that it's also a physical illness. Your brain is in your body. And so when you are experiencing such great discomfort in your body because of something going on in your brain, your mind, that's urgent, and you should talk about it with a doctor. And if your doctor doesn't listen, then talk to another person. Part of destigmatizing mental health is talking about it.
I just would like to add too that I think one piece of offering or getting support for an adult with mental health, I'm going to use the same language you used before, serious emotional disturbance, is that adults are over the age of 18 and have to be willing to engage in services and be part of that discussion and decision making. So it's going to be a little bit more complicated. And so that's just something that people need to be aware of, that you can't just go ahead and sign up your uncle for some of these things. You've got to involve them in that process. So
absolutely. And if you yourself are struggling because you want to support a person with a mental health concern and they maybe aren't on board with that.
Mhm.
There are some groups that the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill offer for
Mhm.
caregivers, loved ones of people with mental health concerns. It's good to talk about it
Mhm.
with other people who are struggling in the same way. We need to
Mhm.
connect. That's
Mhm.
how we heal.
Right, right. So Katelyn, as you said, and as we've kind of talked about this, it is complicated. But what's wonderful to hear is that there's options, which is what's great about CVHI, and that people don't need to feel that it's either staying at home with a child who might be struggling or going to the hospital, that there's some in between there. And we've talked about that today. And this is very, very high level overview of these services. And you might be watching the show feeling like you have some additional questions and want to know where to go first. So do you have suggestions on where parents should start? Maybe either websites to get more information, but also I think it's really helpful to have a person to talk to. I think you've talked about, you've made a few suggestions already, but anything additional?
Sure. There are more. I mean, you can also call Parents Helping Parents. That's a hotline that's open 24 hours, and you will be speaking to another parent. I've heard this is very helpful from, needing to vent to like, I can't get my kid to eat breakfast this morning and I don't know what to do. Because they're parents and they're giving you practical suggestions. I do think practical suggestions are probably the most helpful thing in a moment of crisis. You can, like I said, drop into a family resource center or call. You can talk with your PCP. If your PCP seems like they are not as aware or in the know about mental health, you can ask them to use a service called, ready for more alphabets, MCPAP. It's the Massachusetts Child Psychiatry Access Program. I think it's program.
Yep.
And that's a service that's available to pediatricians to call and ask to consult with a psychiatrist about what to do next. You can, it talked about the nurse lines for your insurance company. I mean, your PTA can be often a great source. Some of the most active parents in the PTA are people who've also needed to be active in the school system because their child has had needs. I would encourage you to talk, to say, I need help, to school nurses, principals. You can call any referral line, likely. If you called Wayside's referral line and we couldn't help you, we would tell you who to call next. So I think the real answer is don't be shy, don't be timid, talk about it.
Great. And Katelyn, you sent us some really great websites ahead of the show, and we'll be sure to post those in our comments as well. So if people have additional questions and at their own pace want to read more about it, they can. And I'll do a little plug for the Southborough community. Please feel free to reach out to us as well, Southborough Youth and Family, if you have further questions. And it's all about connecting people. If we, like you said, if we don't provide the service ourselves, we've developed relationships with outside agencies to try to help connect people where they need to go next. So yes, I second your answer of just talk about it and keep talking about it until your needs are being met. We have about 1 minute left. Shannon, I know that you went to a meeting yesterday on that's about mental health reform in Massachusetts, which is exciting. I know this kind of ties into the conversation we had last week about, lots of people are struggling right now. It's been a difficult year. And at the same time, I feel some hope that more people are using mental health support services because collectively we're all struggling, and stigma is going down in some some circles, which is wonderful to hear. But what happens as a result is that the system is being flooded and, struggles to be as responsive as it wants to be, I think, at times. And so do you want to just share briefly, what that meeting was about yesterday, so that when we can post some information for people on that, they have some context as to what they're looking at?
Sure. I think that what we talked about today is great because the changes that are going to happen are down the road. So knowing what to do in the meantime is very important, but the idea is that it's like a hand-holding service. I think it's called the Front Door program or initiative, that instead of trying to find different providers, different services, you're going to call one number or chat with one person on a website who will say, okay, this is an emergency and you need to go to the ER. Or if it's, maybe ER isn't the place that you need to be right now, let's try to get you into this program. So one of the things that can be so difficult is that when you're dealing with a crisis, advocating for yourself can be incredibly difficult. That's one more onus that's on you. And the idea is to take that off of you so that someone can help you navigate that system. So, and I think one of the things that we talked about last week too, is that, if what you're seeing isn't, if you feel like it's not enough, or these things that are coming down the pike, it's not happening fast enough, or it's not happening in the way that you had imagined it, is that we have such great resources in our representatives, our state representatives, that it's always a good idea to call and advocate and tell our representatives that we need more help, we need more support, we need more programs. And the more of us that make that, say those things, they listen. So, but it sounds like great things are on their way. They're not here yet, but.
Yep. And so many excellent resources available. It seems like this is a sort of way of streamlining things for people, which is wonderful.
Right.
So Katelyn, thank you for coming on today. You're a wealth of information and such an incredible resource to the families that you serve and to our community. And we're so appreciative. And again, we're going to list the information for people in the comments. Feel free to send us more questions. We may not know all of the answers, but we could, if Katelyn doesn't mind, we could send her a couple of questions
Certainly
if we have
can.
follow-up.
Yes, this is my life. I love this.
Oh,
So,
good.
my
Wonderful.
pleasure.
Oh, good. Thank you. Next week, which is March 23rd, do you believe it? We're nearing the end of March soon. We're excited to welcome a couple of members of our Northborough, Southborough, this is a long title, Northborough, Southborough Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition, NSSAPC, just rolls off the tongue, right? Another alphabet soup acronym. Our coalition, our Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition, we have a couple of members coming on who are actively involved in our coalition. Bettina Shakespeare is a physician. She's also a mom and a Southborough resident. And then we also have Tara Rivera, who is a recovery coach, as well as a treatment advocate and a mom also. And they're going to be coming on to talk to us about talking to your children about substance use. Not always an easy conversation to navigate. So we're excited to have them come on. If you have questions ahead of time, please send them to us. And I think that's all I have to say for today. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.